It's time for another episode of Goodnight Northwood. There's a truck that's driving by. Alright, time for another episode of Goodnight Northwood. Parents, if you have not had a chance to go to pansyandthepromise.com, do so today. There's some great teaching resources and family resources that I would love for you to have. Chapter 9, A New Friend. The morning sun was peeking over the tall pine trees to the east of the camp when Papa's voice invaded Pansy's sleep. "Pansy!" Papa's voice rang in her ears. "It's late and we have a big day ahead," he said in his no-nonsense, time-to-get-out-of-bed voice. With one eye open and the other still nearly shut, Pansy shuffled off her bunk and down to the ground below. She heard the cackling of chickens as Mama looked for fresh eggs in their cage under the wagon. She could hear Star barking as he raced in circles around what was left of the smoking campfire. The smell of fresh pine needles and fall sweet weeds filled her head. Pansy stood on the ground and thought, what a wonderful idea Papa had coming on this trip. Even with the flooded streams and the snakes, it has been a great adventure. Pansy liked adventure. Every day she was seeing something she had never seen before and experiencing places and people that were interesting and wonderful. Who knows what the road ahead will bring today, she thought to herself. For 4 months they traveled all the way from their log cabin ranch in New Mexico across miles and miles of Texas prairie and badlands filled with cactus and rocks on their way to the island of Galveston. Sometimes Papa would stop and spend a few days in a pretty spot just to enjoy the view. True to his word, Papa was not in a hurry. They traveled when they wanted and rested when they wanted. Last night, they camped in a community campground outside one of the many small towns they had come through. They were not the only travelers on the road. In fact, the longer they journeyed, the more they encountered other people who were moving from city to city. More of the small towns had campgrounds on the edge of the city where people who were passing through could stop for the night. The campgrounds had special places for the horses and shelters to protect people from the weather while they were eating. Some of them even had places to take a hot bath. It was almost like being home. The best part of the community campground for Pansy was the other children. Growing up on the prairie was wonderful, but she didn't get a lot of opportunity to play with other children, except at school. At the campground, there were often many other children who were also traveling with their parents. Some of them were on long trips, like Pansy, and some were going from one town to another for a day or two. There were games of hide and seek and always other girls to play dolls with and visit. The Morgan family was camping right next to Pansy's wagon. They were traveling on the same road and had a daughter who was exactly the same age as Pansy. Her name was Jenny. Pansy and Jenny quickly became playmates. It was almost like they were sisters. Pansy had always secretly wanted a sister. She thought what fun it would be to have a little sister to watch over and love. The two girls became friends right away. Because the families were traveling in the same direction, one right behind the other, Jenny asked Papa if Pansy could ride in her wagon for a while. "If it's okay with your parents," Papa said. Jenny's parents agreed, and the girls excitedly jumped in the back of Jenny's wagon. As the wagons rolled along, the two girls played with their dolls. Pansy's doll was homemade out of some old scraps of cloth and stuffing. Jenny had fancy store-bought dolls that looked real and lifelike. Jenny's papa had built a dollhouse for her that was almost as tall as Jenny. It had a kitchen, a living room, bedrooms, a beautiful porch. It was painted in beautiful pink and white colors on the outside, just like fancy homes in the big city. On the inside, Jenny's papa had made little tables and chairs and beds, just like the real house. The girls had fun pretending, playing, and imagining they were rich ladies in fancy homes. The dollhouse was beautiful. It did not look like their log cabin ranch in New Mexico. Pansy imagined this must be how fancy houses look back east. After a long time had passed, the girls grew tired of dolls and decided to get out of the wagon and walk along the road. As much as the girls liked playing with dolls, they also enjoyed the outdoors and adventure. Along the roadside were lots of little hand-sized rocks and pebbles. Pansy was the first one to say, "Okay, Jenny, I bet you can't hit that tree over there with a rock." Jenny picked out a smooth stone and threw it with all her might at the selected oak tree with leaves turning yellow in the crisp fall morning air. The stone flew toward its target but fell short in the grass below. Pansy took the stone in her hand and heaved it upward towards the unsuspecting tree, hitting it square in the middle. "I did it," she proclaimed. The game was on. The rules of the game would be 3 rocks and 3 tries. No tree was safe from their newly created activity. This is how it was in those days. Children didn't have store-bought games, so they created fun out of their own imagination. For a while, they threw rocks at the trees. When that got too easy, they picked out branches. It wasn't long until they were trying to pick off birds sitting on the branches. The birds were safe. None of them were hit. Jenny was more accurate at throwing, but it was clear that Pansy had the stronger arm and could throw further. After a while, they grew tired of throwing rocks at trees and sticks for stars to fetch. They ran ahead to Pansy's wagon, which wasn't very far in front. Climbing up into the back of the slow-moving wagon, they started telling stories. Pansy told Jenny about her great-great-grandmother Nancy, who was stolen by the Indians, and Jenny told Pansy about her uncle, who was a sharpshooter in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Mama overheard their storytelling and asked if she could join in. The girls were happy to say yes, so Mama sat next to them on the soft pillows at the back of the wagon, offering each of them an apple. Pansy and Jenny sat eating their apples while Mama talked to them. "Pansy, I don't think we've ever told you the story about your Aunt Virginia and the time her daughter was very sick and almost died, have we?" asked Mama. Mama explained to Jenny. Pansy had a very special aunt by the name of Virginia. She had a daughter that was by the name of Lucy, who was very sick. She was so sick, she had to be put in the hospital. The doctors examined her and used their knowledge of medicine to try to make her well. After days in the hospital, the doctors came in where Aunt Virginia was waiting and said, "I'm sorry, Virginia, but your daughter has a clot in her lungs, and there's nothing we can do. She will only live a few more minutes." Aunt Virginia rushed to the hospital room where her daughter Lucy was lying. The room was dark and cold. Lucy was unconscious and able to speak to her. Aunt Virginia sat down in a chair next to Lucy and touched her on the head and prayed to God. She said, "Lord Jesus, you made man. You know how to heal them. Please heal Lucy right now." That's all she prayed. Mama continued. When Aunt Virginia opened her eyes, she saw a bright yellow light shining at the foot of Lucy's bed, just touching her feet. She never spoke a word, but just watched the light slowly begin to move over Lucy's entire body. At first, the light just shone in her legs, then over her stomach, and finally over her chest and head. When Aunt Virginia saw the light move over Lucy's body, she knew she was being healed. She bowed her head and thanked God for healing her daughter. Virginia got up and went back into the room where she had been resting to lie down and get some sleep. Pansy interrupted Mama and said, "This is sort of like when Jesus was with his disciples in the boat, the Sea of Galilee, and there was a storm going on, but Jesus was sleeping at the bottom of the boat. He wasn't worried at all because he knew about the storm, because he knew God had everything under control." "That's right, Pansy," said Mama. "Aunt Virginia felt everything would be okay." After about an hour, Virginia woke up and went back to Lucy's room. When she came near the door, she could hear a high-pitched chatter and visiting going on inside the room. She opened the door to see Lucy sitting up and talking to the nurse. She was asking why she needed a nurse and why she was being kept in the hospital bed. The doctor arrived at the same time, expecting his patient to be dead, but instead found her alive, well, sitting up and talking. "This is impossible," he said out loud, almost as if he were disappointed. he spoke to Aunt Virginia and said, There's no possible way this daughter of yours could be alive. She should be dead. Aunt Virginia told the doctors that she prayed and God healed her. The doctor just shook his head, saying, But that isn't possible. Aunt Virginia told him nothing is impossible with God. Wow, said Pansy. Jenny looked at Mama and asked, Mrs. Hunt, is that story really true? Yes, Jenny. I've met Virginia, her daughter Lucy, and her daughter Lucy myself. So she really got better even after the doctor told everyone she was going to die? Asked Jenny. Not only did she get better, but she lived for many years until she was a very old grandmother herself, said Mama. About that time, the wagon came to a stop. The girls had been having so much fun telling stories they'd hardly noticed how far they'd traveled. Papa was pulling the wagon over underneath some tall oak trees along the road for the night. They would be setting up camp with the Morgans for the evening. The girls could hear their fathers talking and removing harnesses from the horses. Mama told Pansy that it was time to get ready for dinner and that Jenny's mama would probably want her to help in the wagon. Mama, Pansy begged, can Jenny eat with us tonight? Of course she can, said Mama, because we're all eating together. The girls smiled and shouted approval as Jenny headed over to her wagon to help her mama. See you at dinner, hollered Pansy. Okay, see you then, responded Jenny. With so many hands around Mama's stove, the dinner was ready in a flash. Pansy noticed the two mothers were enjoying each other's company as much as she and Jenny. When dinner was over, the mothers told Pansy and Jenny they would wash the dishes so the girls could go play while there was still some light. Pansy and Jenny didn't have to be told twice, but headed immediately to the edge of the woods, with Star following close behind. We're going exploring, shouted Pansy. Papa responded, Not too far, girls. Keep Star right with you. Okay, we will, their voices sang in chorus as they disappeared into the woods. The woods held all kinds of excitement for the girls. There were things to discover. There were all types of plants and rocks and curious-looking insects. Pansy was not afraid of squirmy things. She was always bringing home some kind of unusual bug for investigation. Along the way, Pansy had collected butterflies and lightning bugs in jars. She loved to hold the jar full of lightning bugs up at night while she was lying in bed and watching them flash their greenish-yellow tails. She also loved the colors of the butterflies, but after a couple of days, she had to let them go because it didn't seem right to have them pinned up when they wanted to fly. One time on the trip, she had seen a doe with her fawn lying in the shade of the willow and oak trees that filled the forest. Pansy loved to wander through the forest near the camp. When they would stop at night, Star would always be right there like a trusted guard. As the girls walked along under the canopy of the tall trees, they talked and laughed and occasionally found a rock to throw at some unsuspecting branch. As they walked deeper into the woods, they came to a clearing which opened up to a beautiful lake. You never would have seen this lake from the road, as the thick forest hid it. There it was, though, the most beautiful blue water Pansy had ever seen. Maybe we could go swimming, said Jenny. Pansy was about to say the same thing when suddenly, from behind them, the girls heard Star sounding his low, rustly growl, the one he made when something unsuspecting or dangerous was lurking nearby. What is it, boy? Asked Pansy. The girls froze in their tracks. Their backs were against the lake, and Star was between the girls and the grove of the trees through which they had just walked. Pansy's mind raced back to the mountain lion, the night in the log cabin ranch. A cold shiver went through her. Jenny was thinking, why didn't we stay and do the dishes? Star grew silent, and his body was hunched over like a spring, ready to lunge at any moment. Just ahead, in the tall weeds that covered the ground, the girls could see something shaking in the grass. Now, they were really frightened. Something was in those tall weeds, and it wasn't friendly. Star began growling in his deepest, most rusty voice. The girls kept backing up towards the edge of the lake. It could be a mountain lion or a bobcat or maybe some other vicious animal. The girls didn't know if they should run or freeze. At that moment, out from the weeds popped a skunk! An angry skunk. Its black and white tail was high in the air as it turned towards Star. "Jump in the water!" shouted Pansy. And without so much a second thought, the girls dove into the lake just as Star lunged toward his black and white opponent. One more bark and the angry skunk let go his smelly spray. The next sound the girls heard as they poked their heads out of the lake was the whining and whimpering of a now very stinky dog. Star went to the right and the skunk ran to the left. The water-drenched girls climbed out of the lake and stood on the shore. They could see the victorious skunk running off into the woods away from them, but the air was filled with the reminder that he had been there. The defeated Star now came back to the girls, but as soon as he got close, the stinky smell of his body chased them away. The girls ran back toward the camp with Star right behind them. As they neared the wagons, they began to shout for Papa and Mama. Poor Star! Even after Papa scrubbed him with strong lye soap in the lake 2 or 3 times, he still smelled like the enemy he had challenged. Mr. Morgan helped hold Star still while Papa scrubbed him all over. "You know, Mr. Hunt," Mr. Morgan said, "this black and white dog looks like a big skunk, and now he certainly smells like one." It would be a week before Star was back to normal. For the next few days, he was kept tied up to the back of the wagon so he couldn't get near anyone. Pansy and Jenny finished the night drying out around the campfire until Jenny had to return to her parents' wagon. Have a good night.